I'm Matt Reynolds, and this is my podcast.
I can do the job, but running the business is quite difficult. What a lot of tradesmen lack, and I was probably one of them, is business skills.
I don't mind making mistakes. You learn from your mistakes.
Information is all around you in the minds of people that work beside you.
Welcome back to the Trench Talk podcast. I'm your host, Matt Reynolds, and my guest for this episode is Sean Stryker. Sean specialises in business growth and has worked with many companies whose names you'll likely recognise, including Coates Hire, News Limited, Harvey Norman, Bunnings, Pacific Brands, BlueScope Steel, Galaxy Entertainment Group, LJ Hooker, Amcor, Super A-Mart, BlueRock and Bakers Delight. The idea of these discussions, for those of you joining us for the first time, is to go into the trenches of achievement and talk not with people who are orchestrating from some lofty perspective, but to those high performers who are actually in the trenches honing their craft. That has included guests from the worlds of business, sport and entertainment, all of whom are on the front lines doing amazing things. In addition to working with some of Australia's biggest and most well-known companies, Sean also works with many smaller businesses, including those in the trade sector. His back-to-basics approach helps his clients develop practical skills and the knowledge to identify opportunities to make more money. He works in the areas of talent management, growing revenue and profit, sales training, sales intelligence, team building and leadership. We discussed a ton of practical business strategies during this chat, including meeting people, first impressions, and the fundamentals of a good handshake, building rapport, sales, including the importance of speaking to your customers in a way that they best learn, simple things many people miss in the sales process, self-awareness, the common reason high performers seek Sean's advice, and of course, much more. As you'll hear, Sean doesn't have a website and there's almost no information you'll find about him online. However, he has sent me a previously published magazine article he authored titled The Inner Salesperson Inside Every Marketer, which I've now reposted on my blog. So for more of Sean's thoughts on the sales process and how he thinks about selling, head to xrm.com.au/blog where you can find and read the piece. He does have a LinkedIn account, so you can also try tracking him down there. If you enjoy Trench Talk, head to xrm.com.au/podcast and opt in for the newsletter. We'll make sure you're notified when every new episode of the show is released. And if you're feeling super nice, please leave a review for Trench Talk on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. A big thank you to Russell, a long-time listener of Trench Talk, for recommending I talk to Sean and for making the introduction. Enjoy my chat with Sean Stryker. Sean, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Matt.
Now, for someone who doesn't know you and what you do on a daily basis, how do you define that role when you, for instance, first meet someone?
Yeah, the old barbecue question.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one for me because I've been doing this now for quite a long period of time, and almost every week I think my role changes.
Okay.
You know, every experience I have suggests that I've become something I didn't think I was. It's quite weird. So when people ask me what do, I don't like the word consultant because that usually means people think charges a lot of money and doesn't say a great deal.
Yep.
There's probably an element of truth to that. It's more about, I think I just am out there to help businesses grow. It's a bit pithy, that line, but in reality that's what it's all about. Now that growth might be any sort of way or area, whether it's revenue or profit or people performance or talent management or team building. It's pretty much that, and I lay it in with that is being a bit disruptive, I think, within that notion of helping businesses to grow. So I like to layer in sort of a level of disruption for them.
Okay.
Get them thinking a bit differently.
In terms of their thinking you're talking about.
Yeah.
So how did you originally find your way into this coaching space? Can we call it that?
Yeah. It's a really weird one. I was a GM in an organisation and I took over a division of this particular organisation that was on its last legs. And so the director of that organisation rolled the dice and brought me over to give it one last shot.
Yep.
So I did that for 3 years. Worked very hard in that 3 years, built in a succession plan for my 2IC to take over my role. The theory was I think people need to make themselves redundant, or at least aim for it.
A sign of doing your job correctly?
Yeah, and I decided that I needed to make myself redundant, and I had a 3-year plan. And pretty much to the day of 3 years, the director called me in and said, "It's over. You've done it. you're now redundant.
Yep.
And I thought, okay, I must admit I hadn't really thought about what I would do next. And it was strange because he said to me, look, you've been our sales coach informally for about a year. You're really good at it. Get out of here and go and start your own consultancy. You're out, but you should do this. And it was a bit of an epiphany where it was like, okay, right, I'm going to. And he said, and I'll bring you back. I'll support you in the beginning stages of your consultancy. So I'm basically firing you, but I'll bring you back now as a consultant and let's get going.
So you had your first client before you left your last job, which is an ideal way to start a new business, right?
It is, because there was some support there financially.
Yep.
The weird thing about it was I only envisaged doing it for 6 months and then going back to full-time work. I'd had a young son that was just born at that stage, so he was less than a year old.
Yep.
And I thought, I'm going to stay home, look after my young son and just have some fun. Literally within weeks, I had clients calling me saying, what are you doing? And I'd tell them, they said, well, come and work for us. Okay. And so very quickly, that 6-month holiday has now turned into, a 14-year experience.
And is that people that you dealt with in your previous organisation that, I guess in some sense, recognise the skills that you'd built?
Yes,
there?
And also because I just put myself out there. What I did was had a strategy, which was apply for jobs on Seek in the knowledge that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing.
Okay. Just to get
the resume over the desk.
Okay.
So I'd apply for training roles or coaching roles. I had really no idea. I wasn't qualified in any way, but I wanted someone to look at the resume and go, well, this guy's not qualified, but maybe we should speak.
So that was a marketing technique? Am I understanding this? Or did you default into that?
It was just a weird marketing technique on my part. So I intentionally applied for roles that I thought I'd never get.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
And so what happened was, it's strange how the universe works, but I'd get phone calls from people who say, you've applied for this role, you're not qualified for it. I'd say, no worries, okay, but hold on a moment. We've looked at something within your experience. We want you to work for us in that particular line of work, but as a consultant.
Okay, and that's how you got your first clients?
And that's how I started kicking it in. It was a weird, it was strange, but it worked for a while.
So is what you're doing now, is it any different to how you thought it would be back at that time in your life? Because obviously you've kept doing it, so it's something you enjoy or get something out of. So is what you thought coaching would be or that space, is it different?
It is. Back? To be honest with you, my background was advertising media. So I worked for the likes of organisations like Fairfax, for example.
Yes.
I thought my niche would be a sales coach in the advertising media space. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is that that vanished fairly quickly. Not to say that I don't work in that space, I still do. I started to very quickly become involved in many other industries in many capacities and different ways that I never envisaged. So to give you an example, I've had 3 stints now where I was brought in as the sales manager, but as a consultant sales manager. So not on the books, paid as a consultant, not as an employee, but still managing a budget, still managing people, hiring and firing, meeting targets. I did 3 of those in this period of time, which I thought was highly unusual. And people in my role generally would never do that.
Yes.
But I've now moved into all sorts of, I guess, learning and development. So not just sales, strongly involved in leadership, strongly involved in business coaching, lots of stuff around behavioural profiling, emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, team building, and working with not just salespeople, but all sorts of other people in business. They don't have to be in sales. Yeah, it's been really weird. So in a typical week for me, I could be working in the veterinary industry one day, advertising media the next, construction building the next. And there seems to be no rhyme or reason for any of them. They just have all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but I suppose over 14 years, just become apparent to me that I've got a skill set that can be replicated in many industries with many different sorts of job functions.
So you do work a fair bit in the trade space and related industries, I know.
Yeah.
Have you got an opinion? Because I really feel that as a tradesman myself, that our sector is kind of coming through this process of becoming more professional in the way that we go about things and we run our businesses. Do you have any sort of thoughts on where we are in that sort of evolution?
Yeah, I spent some time working with lots of tradespeople. For about 18 months, I saw hundreds of them. So they were coming to do a program called a Diploma of Management, and I happened to be the facilitator for that program.
Okay.
So I got to meet a lot of tradespeople from a lot of different trade backgrounds, and I thought it was interesting that they were coming to do a qualification of some sort.
Yeah.
And what I found was that qualification they were doing was probably wrong for starters, but buried within that qualification was a real need for people to learn certain skills.
Okay.
And a lot of those were communication skills. I guess what we call that personal brand type stuff, the soft skills. To what degree are we effectively communicating with our internal and external customers? And I noticed that there was a movement towards, I know my job and I know how to do it, but can I get along with people? Can I get along with a client? Can I get along with a customer? Do I even know what I should be doing with that customer at any point in time? So the shift for me has been about, am I effectively getting along with people, building rapport and relationship? And I think traditionally tradespeople have not been effective in that space for all sorts of reasons, and not necessarily their fault either. The movement towards that, I think, has been significant.
It's probably one of the reasons why we have a lot of small organisations as opposed to a lot of big organisations in particularly the tradesman space, I would have thought, because collectively we're not maybe great at those skills or as good as other industries, I would suggest.
Yeah. I'm not sure people out there in trade-based organisations, I think a lot of them are not particularly self-aware about what it is they're actually doing in terms of developing relationship. They tend to come out, they'll speak with you for a while, they might ask you a couple of questions, they leave and they send you a quote. And that seems to be the process and the delivery. I'm not sure to what degree they were aware enough about, you're in front of a customer, that's your moment. What were you doing then and there to increase your chances of getting that quote accepted?
Yes.
It's almost like they follow this formulaic process. It's quite linear, I think, when in reality they're actually dealing with human beings.
So let's talk a bit more about that, because I know that you do some stuff about first impressions.
Indeed.
What's important in a first impression, and then how does that actually carry out? What do you need to do to ensure that you make a good first impression?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that's very relevant to trade-based organisations, because it's one that I believe is not thought about. And by the way, when I talk about this, it sounds like I'm being critical. The reality is that for many people, why would they know? They've never been taught it. They've never discussed it. They've never had a conversation about
Excellent
it.
point, yeah.
They don't know. It's what I think a lot of these guys and gals actually work from what I call the unconscious incompetent level. I don't know what I don't know.
I think there's some truth in that.
And so my job is to actually help them know what they don't know, and then help them know it and then practice it and master it to the point where it becomes second nature. What we call these days conscious competence, and then unconscious competence, second nature stuff.
So we go to meet someone, we don't think too much about it, but we do the right things to build the relationship.
Yeah, and we want people to do it almost as second nature.
Yes.
But a lot of people aren't at that stage. There are often lower levels of learning in that regards. I'll give you a quick example based on your question there of me. You know, what is it about first impression? I'll give you a classic example. Before I came to see you today, I had to get my caffeine hit, okay? And so down the road here is a coffee shop, and I went into that coffee shop. I expect that my experience is going to be the same for every coffee shop that I go into. You walk up, they say, yes, what do you want? I put in my order, they give it to me, I give them some money, and I walk out. Nothing remarkable about it whatsoever. And it just says to me I could go to any other coffee shop and get treated the same way. And that's standard procedure. This was weird this morning, because when I walked in, someone said to me, what would you like? And I said, I need the biggest coffee I can get my hands on. And this guy who was standing there said, we've got that coffee for you. Right? I never hear that. Now you've got me in. And then he told me what he was going to make me.
Okay. Was the barista that said that?
No, the guy who was on the counter, who clearly seemed to be the front man. The barista was next to him. And as I was waiting, he took my credit card, and when he handed the credit card to me, he goes, thanks, Sean. Stryker, you must be Dutch. That is mind-blowing experience because it never happens. This guy has looked at my credit card, read my name, used my name, looked at me, and had this wonderful ability to very quickly get me in and make it work for me. What that means is I will go back there for my next coffee, even if it's not so great, or even if it's too expensive. I'll go back.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? Because sometimes the way that we deal with situations can actually negate the need to have a good product. I think that's negate's not the right word, but it can maybe cover up some of your shortcomings, give you something to remember, as opposed to the actual product.
Do you know, when I talk to tradies, for example, and I'm working in a trade-based organisation right now quite closely, I talk about the law of scarcity.
Yes.
So there are 9 laws of persuasion in this world, and I practice 3 of them: the law of scarcity, the law of reciprocity, and the law of abundance.
Yep.
And the law of scarcity is exactly what that guy did this morning. So the law of scarcity suggests if I do something a little bit different from everyone else, I make myself scarce. And when you make yourself scarce, everyone wants you. That's what he did. He read my name off the credit card. He smiled. He looked at me. He was presented well. He was dressed well, looked good, used my name. They moved quickly on the order. He thanked me for it. That's the law of scarcity. He did something a little bit different from the other coffee shops, which means he makes himself scarce. People will come back. And by the way, that cafe was full of people.
It's funny, isn't it? Because nothing that you've just said then is, I mean, it's unusual, but it's not particularly hard. It's not a real X factor technique or anything like that, is it?
Nope.
It's just, well, how would you put it? Being engaged in the moment, being interested in the person, being coming from that place, I guess.
People think they do it well. So people think, oh, yeah, I do all of that. But in reality, many actually don't.
So do you go back to, because I know you work for some really big organisations as well, do you go right back to the basics of how you meet people? Is that where, do you cover that? Is that where it starts?
Increasingly now, Matt, I can get myself involved in strategy and planning. I get myself involved in reading spreadsheets and looking at profit and loss statements and all those sorts of things. And that's all cool. Increasingly now, business owners are saying to me, whether it's small, medium or large, we really need to get back to basics. We actually really need to get people thinking about the internal and external customer a whole lot more.
Okay.
We really need to get back to sort of a value systems-based experience.
Yep.
And that value-based experience often drives then the behaviour and your ability to build relationship and connection with people. A lot of the research now is actually saying we're living in a world now where people are distracted by phones, laptops, all sorts of things. We need to get back to soft skills and actually have people conducting themselves appropriately with other people.
It's almost like as that happens, and I think it's going to go more and more that way, again, the basics just stand out so much more, don't they? Because there's also a generation now coming that are almost going to jump over that place in their lives where they learn those soft skills, as you spoke about, right? So they're going to become more and more important, and it's going to be easier and easier to stand out if you have that set of skills.
You're right. And there are schools now in America that insist now that kids at the beginning of every school day shake each other's hands and say, how are you? How was your evening? And let's look forward to a great day today. And they actually are teaching kids how to shake hands, look at each other in the eye, and have a meaningful conversation. Yep. That's now something considered really, really critical in a child's development.
Yep, because it obviously plays out. You learn it early and you have it for life.
It becomes habitual.
Yes.
And I think what we've got now are people who are not being habitual in these sorts of behaviours on a frequent, regular, consistent basis. And I tell you what, I'm getting a pool put in my backyard at the moment, which has been an interesting experience because I'm dealing with lots of tradespeople.
How are they going?
I think they sometimes forget that I'm the customer. And I'm dealing with plumbers, I'm dealing with electricians, I'm dealing with pool installers, I'm dealing with guys who are putting solar matching on a roof. Mm-hmm. And some of them are doing okay and are doing some good things, don't get me wrong, but you can clearly see that some of them are not actually being aware of how they're conducting themselves in that moment where they're meeting me. And they miss out on all, and they miss out on all of these things along the way, which in reality are very simple, but they're not aware of them and they're not doing them. Okay. And it would make such a big difference to me as a customer. And you've only got to go and talk about this at a barbecue on a Sunday. And what does everyone talk about? You betcha. All tradies are the same.
The same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
and everyone has a war story about that. And invariably, it's not so much about the quality of workmanship. It's not necessarily about the product or service they're delivering. It's actually about their inability to engage effectively.
And what have you said that's been the most, has there been any moment you're just like, I can't believe that these guys are doing this? By the look on your face, it seems like there might be several of them, but is there anyone that stands out as, if you're serious about providing a good service here, you wouldn't be doing that?
I think you've heard about this already, but I'm a big believer in the handshake.
I've heard plenty of handshake stories from people that you've worked with. Yep.
That is a critical component of building that, rapport is from the French. It means relationship, right?
Yep.
Making that contact with people is really critical. And I'm absolutely convinced if people got that right, they'd make more money. And it's actually a skill in its own right that I think is being completely missed and absent for many people now. It drives me insane because it's actually very powerful. I was reading some research that said an effective handshake replaces 2 hours of conversation.
2 hours?
An effective handshake replaces 2 hours of conversation. If we get that handshake right, just that alone and the ability to behave around that appropriately, eye contact, posture, all sorts of things, you make more money.
So talk me... Okay, so this I'm interested in because we all like to make more money, right?
Sure.
It's at some point.
Yeah.
So can we break down the handshake? What do you look in your eye? You've mentioned that a couple of times. What do we need to do with our posture as we're actually doing that?
Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for these traders because I'm doing things and it's almost like research, but they don't know I'm doing the research.
Yes.
Okay. So
on the people working at your property.
I don't feel so crash hot about it, but when you're in this space, you tend to do it. You tend to think about it.
Yes.
And it's really interesting. There will be attempts at the handshake, and some of it's actually not bad.
Yeah.
But they miss out on some key components. What I'm seeing now more than ever with tradies in particular, but not just tradies, can I just say many people in business, there is been it's been very marked for me. I've noticed now more than ever that people are shaking hands but not looking at each other in the eye when they do it.
Okay.
It's what I call the look away. And I'm seeing that increasingly now. They will shake a hand, but for 1 or 2 seconds, they actually refuse to engage when that moment occurs.
And that should be the moment you do engage.
You betcha. So the handshake is actually redundant at that point because the receiver of the handshake says, well, yeah, shook my hand, but she never looked at me. So at least subconsciously, that customer's saying, I'm not interested in you anymore.
Okay.
That's a huge problem I'm seeing now in many aspects of business.
Yep.
The actual look away is a big problem, and I don't know why it's happening, but there's almost this inability or refusal to actually make contact from an eye perspective. And I'm not talking about 100%, I'm talking what I call the 80-20 rule. Look at people at least 80% in the eye. 20 you can dart and do all sorts of other things. That's okay. That's a big problem. The other problem is the handshake itself. I'm shaking hands with hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of people a year by virtue of the nature of the business that I'm in.
Yep.
I reckon 5 are plain weird.
Sorry, how many?
5 out of 10 are plain weird.
Plain weird. Okay, I thought that's what you said. I'm like, that's
plain
half. Okay.
Weird. And when I talk about plain weird, by the way, I talk about this in my training, particularly with salespeople.
Yes.
They're too soft, they're too strong, they're too short, they're too long, they're doing all sorts of things, and they're just not thinking about the simplicity of the handshake. Keep it simple and effective. They do all sorts of weird stuff with it. So there's that, there's the lack of eye contact, but there's also the problem with posture. They're not standing appropriately, they're not the right distance from that person, they're too close, they're too far away, their legs are too far apart, too close together. It's interesting. The research shows that when you meet someone, you've probably got about 3 to 30 seconds to make it work. If you don't within that period of time, you're just about dead.
Okay.
So the critical nature of this is such that if you get that right in 30 seconds, you're just about home. You'll get the sale, or at least you increase your chances of conversion. A lot of people will say, I don't want to do business with that person, and they often don't know why.
Yeah, look, we've all had those situations, haven't we, where we're
absolutely
just not quite right, is what you're saying, right? You can't, articulate exactly what it is, but
they can't.
It may stem, in a lot of cases, from the handshake.
Well, they'll argue...
Well, that would contribute to the situation.
Yeah. Well, they will actually say, I don't buy it because it's too expensive. Now, there may be sometimes an element of truth to that, but in reality, it's often because that engagement, that connection was never made, or it was fractured in some way. And so subconsciously the customer goes, no, I don't get it. I don't understand that. And sometimes people say, I can't get my conversions up. I send out the quote, they don't accept it. Well, have you really thought about, before even the quote and acceptance, what happened at the very beginning? That probably had a huge part to play. And Trotta said to me, really? So, I said, did you think about, how did that interaction go in the first minute? I don't know, I can't remember. Don't know. That maybe is where there is I think, the word's not failing, but it's a challenge for people to meet because we're just not talking about it. We're not doing enough work in that space. Someone said to me in business recently, he agreed with what I was saying, quite senior in business in Australia, and he said to me he believes that there was once upon a time, a long time ago, when we had family members who would teach you how to shake a hand. And he believes that generationally that's been lost.
Well, I was just thinking as you're talking that there's got to be a reason why we started doing that. It's not just something that two people walked together one day and it just happened and everyone else copied, right? There must be, like so many things in the evolution of humans, if you go right back to the first handshake, it would have been something about connecting with this person. I'm assuming, I don't know, reading how honest they could be or should be, get your feeling, about them right.
Yeah.
I guess it would go back to that at some point, right?
Yeah, it does. And I think, I still think that people like other people. I think we like people and we want to be engaged with people. I think that's sort of what makes the world go round. But to what degree are we geared up to do that effectively and think about that a little bit more? I'm not quite sure about. If you look at the really great people in business, they're really good at these things. So I look for role models all the time. And when I'm in business and I'm meeting lots of people, I'm meeting CEOs, managers, people out in field. Yeah. They're really great people in business. They have this stuff in abundance. They're aware of it and they do it phenomenally well.
And it's on purpose.
Great call. Yeah. It's designed. They design it to be that way, and they have this wonderful ability to connect with people. But a lot of it's about the first impression. That first 30 seconds or so is really it.
So is a firm handshake, I'm assuming, is the way to go? You look them in the eye. How does it?
Yeah.
That's right.
It's back to basics.
Yeah. A
firm handshake, hold it for a couple of seconds, not too long.
Yeah.
Look at that person in the eye and then greet them and use their name, and you're just about there.
Okay.
So what another part of the handshake is making connection with people by using their name. You'll be amazed how many people in the business world don't use each other's name in business. I will have people come out and see me at home to do some work on my house. They will never, ever use my name once. There's a golden rule. Use the person's name 3 times, beginning, middle and end, and you get more sales. It is amazing how many people do not do that. I had an electrician come out the other day as part of the pool install, and frequently he used my name, and I thought that was highly irregular and highly unusual.
And he obviously got the job. Or was he partway through the job?
When he comes out and was doing the job, he wanted my advice about something. So he said, Sean, can you come outside and what hit me was Sean.
Yeah.
Like, what? No, that's pretty interesting. I found that compelling.
Yes.
And people do. But it's quite rare. It's actually quite rare. So part of that whole handshake and first impression is not just body language. It's about what comes out of your mouth. Using people's names, for example, is very, very powerful.
Very, very important.
Yep.
Sales. You've got a lot of experience in coaching and mentoring sales teams.
Yeah.
How do you think about sales from a macro perspective?
There's a lot of theories out there about sales.
Yep.
A lot of people making a lot of money or attempting to make a lot of money with a new whiz-bang theory about selling.
Yes.
I think I've seen it all and heard it all. I think at the end of the day, it all ties into very much the same process, very much the same theory. And it's really all about, do I have an ability on a macro level, if you're talking about the world in sales,
Yep.
what makes salespeople brilliant, what makes them effective? And it's a commitment to a process. That process is pretty simple. And it's often based on this notion of, I need to uncover your problem, your challenge, your issue, your pain, and I've got something to help you with alleviating that, reducing it, getting rid of it.
Yes.
That's fundamentally what it's about on a macro level. Now, there's lots of complexity involved in that, but in simple terms, it's a bit like, well, there was a moment where I used to be a sales coach and I used to get dressed up as a doctor. So I wore a white robe, white coat, and I had a stethoscope. And I used that as the image for the sales team about you need to become doctors of selling.
Okay.
Stop pushing product on people and telling people about your product. They're generally bored out of their mind within minutes.
Yes.
Why don't you ask some questions? Why don't you try to uncover the issues they've got, the challenges they've got, the pain they've got? Take some time to do that. Ask great questions, effective questions, sexy questions, what I call them.
Yeah.
Build rapport at the same time, and then help them understand that you've got something that will get rid of that or reduce it. No different to what a doctor does. When you go into a doctor's surgery, the doctor doesn't say, now be quiet, I'm going to prescribe you something and hope like hell it works. It could kill you next week, but that's just the way life is.
Yep.
They actually ask a series of questions to uncover the pain. They need to understand the impact or effect of that pain. Then they prescribe a medicine, and then they get you back. They're great salespeople, by the way, doctors. They're great comeback merchants. They're brilliant at it.
Yeah.
They're true salespeople.
Yes.
Therapists, psychologists, counsellors, absolutely brilliant salespeople, because what they do is that they ask questions and let people speak.
Yep.
And as part of that, they then uncover the madness for that person, and then they try to impact or affect that in some way on a positive level through their product or service. That's on a macro level.
So, yeah, it's a super easy way to actually remember it, right? I mean, I'm just thinking if you go to, in our case, to do a quote or whatever, you think like a doctor and ask questions first. That kind of makes, you're kind of going to get roughly into the right sequence.
You're absolutely right. And I've got people who still say to me, so I remember the white coat.
Yeah.
And I think about that when I go into a meeting now. We have too many people out there who are talking far too much. It's probably like I'm doing right now in this podcast. They should be talking far less and listening far more. And how you do that is through great questioning. And that really is, it's the killer punch. I'm not suggesting it always works, and I'm not suggesting it's the only method.
Yeah.
But by and large, on a macro level, I believe that's where we need to be.
So is there a default set of questions, or how do you go about putting those questions together?
That's a great question. You get lots of people out there who ask random questions, but with no real technique or framework around it.
Yep.
So when I talk about great salespeople are committed to a process, and they're also committed to a questioning technique that works for them. I actually prescribe a particular questioning technique, and it's all about uncovering the challenge or the issue and getting people to understand the impact or consequence or the effect of that challenge or issue. So I actually have set questions that follow that framework of questioning and that technique to then find out what truly is going on for that person, whether I have an ability to actually impact that in a positive way. There are some really good techniques out there, but a lot of them are very complicated and complex. No. We need to break down to real simple terms.
Yes.
So I'll give you an example. I'll sit in front of a customer and I'll say, so tell me about some of the top, what are your top 3 challenges in business at the moment? And they will talk for hours about that.
Yep.
Just that one question alone is a question, I call it the problem question.
Yes.
Okay? They'll just start talking. And then I might say to them things like, or ask them things like, so you've identified you've got an issue here in your business. It's a problem or a challenge for you. Talk to me about the impact that's having on your business at the moment.
Yes.
They'll talk for another 2 hours. And that's what I call the E or the I. It's the implication effect question. I'll just give you an example. There are 2 questions that are very powerful in getting people to talk and then to understand what they're doing and what happens if they don't do something about it.
Yep.
A lot of people I find in business, particularly small business owners, They have lots of issues or challenges, but amazingly don't think about them because they're caught up in the daily business life. And they say to me,
True.
I don't have any time to think about that stuff. And then when they sit down with me and we'll talk through that situation, a bit like therapy, they'll go, oh my God, I've just isolated 3 things I haven't done anything on or about.
Yes.
Now I need some help.
Yep.
Sometimes we need to help people understand their problems because we presume they know their problems when in reality sometimes they actually don't see them.
Yeah, I read or heard somewhere once that before you can ever sell a solution, you first have to sell the problem, which is exactly what you've just said, right? Because
Yeah, correct.
I'm going to take a chance and try and remember this. Because we either buy a solution to a problem that we already have, or we buy a solution to a problem that somebody gives to us. But the more prominent you can make the problem in someone's mind, the more likely they are to buy a solution to that, right?
You're absolutely right. It's interesting you bring that up. There are people I work with in business who have problems and not aware of them.
Yes.
Okay, my job is to uncover those.
Yep.
I sometimes, however, go into industries or organisations where I actually won't use the questioning technique. I'll tell them what their problem is already.
Okay.
And then they, is it? Yeah, I think it is. How do you know that? Well, by virtue of my experience in your industry, I think I'm pretty much on the money. And invariably they go, yeah, you're right.
Yep.
So I sometimes, it's what's called the challenger model, by the way, in sales, but I sometimes challenge people with a problem that I'll actually provide them and not even ask them any questions about it. And that's another method, but you've got to be pretty good at that. You've got to know your industry and your market to be able to do that.
Yes, and you've got to be, I'd assume in that circumstance, you also need to be very careful you don't come across as arrogant in the sale of that, right? So that's
Yeah, which is why, Matt, you need to build rapport and relationship at the beginning very successfully. And that's where the handshake, the name, how you conduct yourself, that's what I call the oil, okay? That greases, that oils that machinery to a point where you've earned the right to be able to do that.
Yes, no, that
Earning
makes
the right's critical.
That makes perfect sense. So in a lot of industries, you need to make people aware of the problem, as we've just said. But in the trade space, and particularly in the maintenance sector, if there's water coming out the ceiling, the problem is pretty obvious, right?
Indeed.
So the sale of that, I guess, is you get your foot in the door, and you're probably going to be the one that sorts it out because it's an urgent thing that needs to be dealt with.
Yep.
So after you've established the problem that you can solve, where does the sales process need to go from there to not only be effective in that moment, but also to open the door, I guess, for future sales as well?
What's critical is it's all well and good uncovering the illness, but if you don't have the medicine, it makes it a bit hard. Or if you prescribe the wrong medicine, there are complications.
Yes.
What's critical from that moment is that if you have artfully uncovered those issues and challenges, it's all about the medicine you prescribe that's actually going to take it away, reduce it. So you need to prove to the customer that you can do that and the job that you do actually does it.
Okay.
And so it's all about evidence and proof. Customers now are screaming for experts who can provide the necessary evidence and proof to make it go away.
They want more information because they're accustomed to getting more information now, right? Because
They get it from anywhere.
Well, it's in their hand. They walk around with it,
Yeah.
right?
If you can prove through your great work that you've solved that problem, reduced that pain, generally people will pay more for that and they're more than likely to ask you back. And here's the killer punch. They're more than likely to refer you on to someone else. They will go and tell someone on a barbecue on a Sunday, you need to get Matt involved in your plumbing because this guy is all over it.
Yep.
He engages. He worked out my problems, some I didn't know even existed. He did a fantastic job. There's the evidence. I'm happy to pay that amount of money. Whenever I've got a problem with my plumbing, for example, I'll get him back. And by the way, you should too.
Yeah.
And that's often how it works.
You take the price conversation out of the equation
Almost
moving
entirely.
forward, which is...
Yep, a lot of research shows that people will... We believe that everyone fights on price in this world. The reason why they fight on price is because they know nothing else, because generally what they get is not all that flash.
Yep, good
So
point.
they're resorted to fighting on price. What else can they fight on?
Yes.
You'll find that research shows that people will actually pay more if all of those things are done well and you're an expert, they'll give you more money. They'll pay you more money.
It's a bit of a change, isn't there, too, that we used to think of about trying to keep what we do a little bit of almost like a secret, like that's our secret sauce. We don't want to tell who we're selling to or working for or whatever. But it's almost like if you're prepared to over-educate even your customers, you sell a lot more, right? Because once they understand what's involved in the process and all the benefits, then even more willing to pay for that. Is that, I mean, in general circumstance, I guess you're always going to have that person that wants to get the information and do it themselves, and that's fine. But as an overarching consumer behaviour out there, I think there's something in that. I think we're changing towards that.
I think, you make a good call. People are hungry for information.
Yes.
My concern is it's not delivered appropriately. So customers want information, okay? They do.
Yes.
It's often delivered haphazardly or incorrectly, so the information has never really been absorbed. I'll give you a classic example. As part of this pool that I'm having installed, which is, I don't know how much money I'm spending at the moment, it's unbelievable. Seems to be they always say the pool is the money pit, right? I can sort of see how that's working out.
Yeah.
But I'm paying it because I'm getting good work done. We had an addition made to the pool, which was a spa sitting next to the pool, right? Okay,
Yes.
It sort of flows in, and I don't know much about it. My wife organised this.
Yes.
And I'm glad she did because it's fantastic looking and I think it's going to be a great addition to the pool. It was really interesting. I had some guys come out to talk about what they were going to do. The language they used, I had no comprehension of what they were talking about. I've never been a tiler. I've never laid cement or concrete. I don't know if that's even the right term, by the way. I think cement then becomes concrete, something like that. It was amazing. And they said to me at one stage, so are you comfortable with this? And sorry, I don't understand what you've just said. They failed to recognise in some respects, or not even failed, because I think they did a good job in actually fixing the problem. I said, look, guys, I'm a visual learner. You're talking to me here with language I don't understand. I can't process that. I can't picture that. But what they did was they started drawing things for me. Then they sent me things on email, which were photos of jobs that they had done. Then I understood the process. I understood the information. I started to understand the language.
Yes.
One of the big problems out there at the moment is we will provide information which customers want, but we do it incorrectly because we don't know how the other person learns.
Yep.
It's all well and good telling me about things and using really tricky words and language I don't understand, but I'm not an auditory learner. I'm a visual learner. So if you provide that information to me visually, you've got a much better chance of me saying yes. So when I work with some people in sales, for example, they'll come to me and say, I'm not good at conversion. I pitch the product and a lot of people say no. I say, oh, cool. And they'll pitch the product to me. It's really good. I said, but I'm sorry, you haven't shown me a single picture yet about that. Why would I do that? Well, I'm visual, I'm not auditory. Or I might be kinesthetic, touch and feel.
Yeah.
Give me something to hold, play with, look at, and you'll increase my chances of saying yes. So there's a real issue out there about the dissemination of information and how we actually impact people's ability to learn. And in many trade-based organisations, almost all of their pitching of a product is auditory. They're ruling out a big part of the population.
So how do you actually identify what sort of person somebody is? Because that sounds good in theory, but then if you're actually on site selling product or service and talking to people, is it a quick trial and error? Do you talk and see if they respond, and then do you let them hold something and see what happens, or do you draw something, or how do you get to that?
Yeah, there are a number of ways of doing it, and it's quite complex at times, by the way. This is just something you don't learn overnight.
Yes.
Often in the rapport building stage, I'll get people to speak to me, and I'll say things, and they'll say things like, oh, I hear what you mean.
Okay. So again, it's in the setup.
Hear what you mean? I now think they might be auditory.
Yep.
Or they might say, yeah, I feel like this, or I feel this way. Probably kinesthetic, touch and feel.
Yep.
Or they might say, yeah, I see what you mean.
Yep.
By the way, I actually say to a lot of people now, why don't you ask the customer how best they learn? It'll blow their mind because they will have never been asked that question. So sometimes,
Pretty easy, yeah.
Often when I sell to people, my own consultancy, and I sit in the room and it comes to me perhaps talking about what I do,
Yep.
which I'm sometimes completely bored with because I've said it so many times, I'll actually say, hey, tell me about what's the best way of getting this to you? What's the best way of me imparting this information to you? Are you a visual learner? Would you like me to show you something? Is it all through your ears? Do you want to hear more of it? Do you want me to give you things that you can touch and feel? They'll actually tell you how they learn, and then I will tailor my presentation along those lines.
So how do you learn? That's an easy question to ask.
How do you learn? And you know what? Most customers will say, oh, yeah, I like to see things. Can you show that to me? No problems at all.
Yeah.
No, don't worry about showing me. Just can you give me something to play with or touch and feel or look at? If we're talking about pool installation, can I touch and feel the tiles that you're talking about?
Yep.
Can you show me a picture of the tiles that you're talking about? You know, all of those sorts of things.
Yep.
Ask people. Just be honest and say, hey, I'm not sure how you best learn. Can you tell me how you best learn? It's very, very powerful. And there would only be 1 in 100 that would ask that question. And that one probably gets more conversions than the other 99.
I'm assuming probably you can ask, would you like to come and see this, or would you like me to explain it to you?
There you go.
Different way to the same answer, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
You can actually build up different ways of doing the same thing,
Yes.
asking it in a different way, but still uncovering what you really want.
Okay.
Yep.
You must have met some really good salespeople in your time. You mentioned the personal interaction being a sort of a key component of that leader, CEO. Is there anything that really stands out in these good salespeople? I mean, if you go to the top of a public company or whatever, do the top 5 salespeople all operate or all have some things in common?
I'll answer it through some research. I do quite a bit of work around a piece of research from a company called the Objective Management Group, and what they did, they did some research into what makes great salespeople great and mediocre salespeople mediocre.
Yeah.
And you might find this statistic interesting. They worked out that of all of the population of the people they measured and spoke to and interviewed to try to uncover what was really going on for those salespeople, they believe that 74% at best were mediocre.
Okay.
And 26% were the ones that made the money, of which 6% were the ones that were the real high flyers.
Okay.
And in my experience, salespeople that I work with, I would say somewhere between 6 and 7 are okay.
Percent.
Average.
Yeah.
I then work with a couple who I think, boy, oh boy, okay, there's something about you. And there's usually probably 1 out of 10 where I think, wowee, you've got it. And I'll go back to the research to illustrate this point. When they try to work out what were the factors that separated the 26 from the 74, they came down to 4 factors, and it was outlook, desire, commitment, and responsibility. So when you ask me a question like what makes them great, this is what they were saying. They've got a great outlook. They wake up in the morning, and regardless of what's going on in their world, I'm happy to be alive, and I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to go and have some fun and enjoy the day.
Yep.
Regardless of what's going on in my world, whether it be professionally or personally, I have a positive outlook on the day, the people I'm going to meet, what I'm going to do. Desire refers to desirous of success, of a win. At the end of the day, I want to be able to drive home and say, I achieved something today. I got a win. I got a sale. I got a second meeting. I got an appointment, whatever it might be. The commitment was a commitment to a process. I've got a process that works, and I work that process. Doesn't mean to say I don't vary it or change it, but I have a theoretical framework to what I do.
Yep.
Doctors have that, for example. That's why they go to university. The interesting one was responsibility. Regardless of what goes on around me, I am the only person responsible for my success or my failure. I can't blame anyone else. I can't blame a boss. I can't blame a partner, my kids. I can't blame Donald Trump. I can't blame my football team. At the end of the day, it's what I call 3 o'clock in the morning thinking. People wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because their subconscious is saying, wake up. I've got something for you. Now, when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you are truly on your own. Regardless who might be in the bed with you, you're truly on your own.
That's true. Yes.
We call it 3 o'clock phenomenon. In those moments is where your true responsibility lies. I can't blame anyone for anything that's going on. It's about me and making sure I do it. I'm responsible for that. And this research showed that these 4 factors were critical in deciding on who was great and who was mediocre. So you've even got salespeople who technically may not be all that competent, but they make up for it in some of those factors.
Yep.
And we tend to gravitate to people like that. If I meet you today and we're both talking in positive terms, we've got an outlook on the day that's pretty successful. When I came here, it was raining. Do I get sad about that? Or do I think about, I'm glad it's raining because the garden needs some water? Yep. It's those sort of things that make a huge difference to the outcome. So it's a really critical piece. We talk a lot about mindset. I think it's a bit overdone these days, this notion of positive mindset. You hear it all the time. It's really about habit-forming behaviour that means that I can set myself up for success. If I'm technically competent as well, magnificent. You are really on your way. But often that alone will overcome the shortcomings of where you may be technically incompetent.
I've got a bit of a theory on this that I'll run by you.
Good.
I think that all of these things have a much better chance of coming together when you actually take on responsibility. I think that when you're put under pressure or some sort of pressure to get an outcome,
sure,
and it's on your shoulders,
yeah,
you have to develop an intent. You have to figure out a system. You have to start running all of these things.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the more you're prepared to take on, the faster you'll get there. I don't think you can get there if you take zero responsibility. So my thinking comes out of, well, it must be the opposite way to really ramp this up, right?
Yeah.
Is that a worthwhile thought? Does that make any sense at all?
Do you know, Matt, it doesn't matter what you think, as long as it's right for you.
Yeah, okay. That's good. Fair enough.
And as long as that thought pattern for you creates that desire to want to be successful.
Yep.
It creates that, it's a bit intangible, isn't it? But I don't know, when you wake up in the morning, what are you thinking about? And I think those first thoughts that are in your head, whatever they are and however you got there, is what will drive you to be and do what it is you want to be.
Yep.
There's in psychology something called the basic change model, and I've sort of stolen that to a degree and created my own theory called PAR.
Okay.
I'm a golfer, a very bad one, but I called it PAR because I needed something to help me on the golf course. Right. And it stands for perception, action, result. PAR. That's a golfing term for me. Regardless of what your theory is or my theory is, often when you distill it down to what it's really all about, it's fundamentally about when you wake up in the morning, what perception do you have of yourself, the world, the people around you?
Yep.
That perception, no matter which way it goes, negative or positive, will drive certain actions and attitudes and behaviours, P to A. And those actions and attitude behaviours that you display throughout the day to other people, to your family, to yourself, when you look in the mirror, that will drive the result. And that result could be good or bad. And that result will then reconfirm the perception you originally had. So I call it the self-fulfilling prophecy. PAR, P-A-R. Very, very powerful in terms of, I guess, creating that mindset and how it plays out and what outcome it drives for you each and every day. So regardless of any of these theories that you and I are talking about or how you think about it, how I think about it, great people in business that I meet have a wonderful perception of themselves, and you see it in their action, attitude, behaviour. They get good results, and those results reconfirm that perception. It's all largely in your subconscious, however, and some of it leaks out into the conscious part of your brain, and that's what you show people.
So these successful people that you're working with and working with their teams, is there any common things to what they come for you for? I mean, there's sales training and there's different areas that you work in, but what I've noticed is when you run your own business or organisation, when you are a leader, there's sort of a few things that are very common that people feel. As an example, loneliness would be one of them that comes up quite a bit. again, of the really successful people that you work with, what are they most wanting from your guidance?
It's a really good question, Matt. Clarity.
Okay.
Clarity.
Yeah.
Many business owners will say to me, how do I deal with the excruciating minutiae of daily business life? They're doing 1,000 things in one day. They're on an endless search for complete clarity of thought. And that's hard when they're so busy. They're running organisations. They're managing people. They go home. They may have families, and they deal with the madness of that.
Yes.
Okay? They want clarity so that they truly know how they can be completely effective in what they do.
Okay, so they want to know what they're doing is the right thing.
They want to know that what they're doing is not just efficient, but
in regards to where they want to go, yes.
Yeah, so I call it, there are the 2 F words, I call it in the world. Everyone assumes I'm going somewhere with that. It's EFF for efficiency, EFF for effectiveness.
Yep.
The 2 F words.
Yep.
We have too many people in business who are efficient. You know what? No one's really interested in that anymore. It's a dime a dozen. We're all reasonably efficient. We've got phones, laptops, TVs, all sorts of things. iPads. I'm a bit old, so I don't understand some of this stuff right away. But look at this stuff we've got here right now.
Yep.
It's what we've got. It makes us efficient. Doesn't necessarily make us effective. So what we're talking about is this. I have business owners who truly say to me, I know I am doing things right. That's efficiency. What they really say to me is, and where the clarity comes in, but I want to do the right things, and that's effectiveness. Yes. And they're looking for the clarity of that. That is ultimately what many people in business are searching for, and it's not always easy to get.
That was going to be my next question. How do you, what path do you go down to work out if you're being effective or not? Because there's, of course, got to be degrees of effectiveness.
No doubt.
Right? So if you want to become effective, more effective than what you already are, what's your advice on becoming more effective? And I know that's probably a big question, but...
It's a huge question, but if you link it back to what I said earlier around, as the very basis of it, psychological, that effectiveness will only come through perception, action, result. The power of your own self-perception will drive that effectiveness. Yep. When people don't have a very strong perception of things, it often means it reduces their effectiveness. So we've got to come back to the psychology of it. I can give all the tips and techniques and, I not like the word tricks, but theories and concepts. Yeah, that's all cool. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's all about, as a baseline, the psychology of how you adapt to things throughout the day that will drive your effectiveness. Yep. We've got to come back to mindset, but we've got to come back to the perception of that. That's actually where it starts. So when I work with business owners, I'll spend a day with them talking.
Yeah.
And almost always it's psychological. It's not strategy.
Yes.
It's not planning. It's not business planning. It's actually about perception of things and how do you arrive at a moment in your life where you go, you know what, I've got a pretty good perception about this. And then it kicks in the effectiveness through the appropriate action, attitude and behaviour.
So I have a question that I often ask about the ability to get more done, because some people can run countries, other people can run, as I say, 7 minutes late for dinner and it throws their whole week out. So how do you think about that in order to get more done? So what you're saying is it's the perception you have of things that happen to you which will determine where you end up.
Completely.
Which spins into this, I'm just envisaging a wheel, this self-fulfilling almost prophecy of what you become, you know, as a human being, I guess you'd say, in the long run.
And you're right. And, you know, many of your listeners, for example, have probably read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. That first habit, which is, you know, it's all about proactivity versus reactivity. To me, for many people in business, that's the starting point to effectiveness. Now, there's a lot of psychology involved in that, by the way. But how do you get more done is by being less reactive and more proactive. Now, that sounds simple, but it's horrifically complex for many people.
Yeah, because in the moment, it gets very hard to put that into practical terms. Right?
It is. I actually liked what he said. He says you've got to say no. Where you get your clarity is saying no, not yes.
Yep.
It's a really interesting piece around that. Saying no is where you become more proactive than you do reactive. We often have a tendency to say yes to everything. Why do we? We want to make more money. I keep saying yes to things. And I get that.
Yep.
We just want to have more yeses to conversations, meet more people. All good, all good. But I think sometimes, we've got to actually sit back and say, where's my laser beam focus? Where can I be truly effective to drive the greatest outcome? Some of the best salespeople I meet don't work 5 days a week. They work 3.
But they get the most amount of results or the highest sales or however they determine that.
Because they've worked out exactly how their proactivity determines a result that they are comfortable with. You get salespeople running around being highly reactive, putting out fires, solving problems, all sorts of things. But in reality, does it really drive the revenue? Probably not.
Yeah.
So I think the ability to say no is critical. But I also think that we live in a world of reactivity. We tend to respond to lots of things very quickly. Now, I'm not sure about that. And how comfortable we are in saying no is an interesting one. But I'll give you an example of where I noticed this.
Yeah.
I need to get some fencing quotes done for my pool. There were some companies who said to me, we're not going to come and see you. You send us the details, and with the details that you send us, we'll work up a quote for you and then contact you and talk it through. Okay. I thought that was really interesting. Now, initially people said to me, that's outrageous that they wouldn't come out and see you. That's terrible customer service. You'd only surely buy off the person who came out and saw you. And I said, why? Hold on a moment. They may have a business model at the moment where that's highly effective for them. It works.
Yeah.
Rather than drive 2 hours to come and see me, I live in Ocean Grove. They might be on the other side of Melbourne.
Yep.
Rather than drive the 2 hours or 3 hours in peak hour of traffic to come and see me, 20 minutes, have a conversation, leave, draw up a quote. They've said, no, hold on a moment. There's actually a better way of doing this for us. Now, I think that's being highly proactive, but we automatically assume that that's wrong.
Yes.
I wonder whether they've got the laser beam focus, and good luck to them. They're probably doing really well as a methodology.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to sometimes break some of the rules about how we actually view, how we set up our day, how we deal with customers, how we seek that business. I think it's interesting. I believe in soft skills and I believe in selling to people face to face, but there are times when we've got to build in methodologies where we can do it differently and still arrive at the same result.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are times in business when you are forced to respond or take action, if you like. That would be in the times when there is, quote, disaster of some form or fashion that comes into the business that needs to be dealt with. How do great leaders that, from your perspective, respond in those situations? And it may come back to what we've just spoken about, but is there an attitude? Is there a go-to set of skills? Because as you're growing, it's just kind of the nature of the beast, right? That you have more problems to deal with in some form or fashion.
Of course. I think for many business leaders that I work with, it's all about the mitigation of risk. Yes. So they have in play procedures and principles and thinkings that mitigate the risk of anything that happens that's, say, for example, disastrous. Yep. And they practice for it.
Okay.
So they'll often almost preempt a lot of the disasters that are going to happen. That's influence. That's great leadership. And they build in contingencies to mitigate the risk as much as possible. And I see great business leaders do that. It's almost like they think of the problem before it occurs and they're ready for it when it does. Yep. And they've got a team of people around them that are ready for it as well.
Yep.
Do you know, it's funny, I've got a cousin who's a fighter pilot and
oh, wow.
And flies F-18s, and I was asking him about what's the job like. And he was actually talking to me about a lot of the flying they do is just horrendously boring. They sit in a cockpit and they fly.
Yep.
And they might fly long distances. It's just boring. You sit there in this confined space. He even told me that when they're flying in formation, they'll talk to each other, but they'll do things like just have trivia sessions. What's the capital of France? And they're not looking, they're thinking of ways to actually get through some of the boredom of that. Yep. But what they do really well as leaders is that in the readiness for a problem or a disaster, they are highly prepared to mitigate the risk. And most of their training is around that.
Yes.
and I've had business leaders actually say to me, I actually want my job to the point where it's boring.
Yeah, it's almost like a sign that, again, you're doing things well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I'm ready for the moment when something does go a little bit weird and wonderful. I've preempted that already, and I've built in the contingencies and the planning to deal with that. It's almost like they want boredom. And when they've hit boredom, they know they're in the game. Strange thinking, I know. It's a bit weird, and I talk about this with business leaders, but business leaders often say to me, yeah, you're right. Yeah, when it's boring, it means I can get on to the next thing, the next part of my vision, the next idea, the next theory, the next concept, or the next thing that I want to drive within the business. And I've got people around me, for those that have the luxury of that can get ready for when the problems do occur. And I put my faith and trust in it, and they can do it because we're ready for it. We've planned and prepared for it.
And again, it's that ability, I suppose, to say no to many things, so you're in the position where you can say yes or go when you need to go, right?
Indeed.
So,
absolutely right.
What's your favourite area of what you do, Sean? Do you have any really stuff that you think, boy, oh boy, I get to do sales training today, and you look forward to that, or
my favourite moment? I love working with business leaders, and I very much love working with them one-on-one. I love getting in a room with someone who's successful.
Yeah,
I love it because they've got great stories, and they're really interesting people.
Yeah.
I love that moment because I learn so much from them. Half the time they're actually training me, not the other way around. And I just love those rich stories they tell me about. For example, I love the moment when I sit in front of someone and I'll say, how did you get here? And then for 3 hours, they'll tell me how they got there.
Yeah.
I love that moment because almost always the stories are never boring. They're incredibly interesting, and no one's got the same story. Yeah. Every story is different. And I love storytelling, and I love listening to people's stories because when I work with other companies, I will tell those companies about the stories that I've been told.
Okay.
And that's where the real learning comes into play for many people. It's through that. Yeah. That for me is the greatest moment I can ever have. Going back to what do I call my business, or what's it all about? And I talked about helping businesses grow.
Yes.
I can do that through those people telling me their stories and using those stories to then work out which way we can go.
Yep.
I love that moment the most. That's, for me, the most beautiful moment.
And most of the guests that I have, with a couple of exceptions on the podcast, have a fair bit of information out there in terms of what they do. A website, for example, that explains to people looking around how they can find them and all that.
Yep.
Whereas you are quite the opposite, and you have. I actually had to ask you to send me something because you don't have a website. Is that
correct?
I couldn't find it if you do. So
don't have one.
You don't have a website. You sent me a couple of pages with just some dot points on what you do, which I assume is what you send to prospective clients.
Yeah, occasionally. Yeah.
So why not put some of this information out there? And I appreciate, because I know it's not your natural way of doing things to kind of talk about this. And I thank you for being here, obviously. But
no, thank you.
What's your theory behind being a bit closed about what you do?
It's a really good point. I'm every digital marketer's nightmare because I get inundated with people saying, you've got no idea what you're doing and you need to be out there and you need to have a website. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? I made a decision a long time ago. I would measure my success on repeat referral business.
Okay.
That was the methodology I decided upon.
Yep.
Why did I do that? Because some of the very best people in my industry, no one knows exists. They get more work than they can ever care to imagine, and you can't find them anywhere. And I just decided, for me and my family, I work part-time. I don't work full-time. I allot time to be with my wife and my kids, and I wanted to be able to do that. So money wasn't the be-all and end-all, by the way. It was about that work. I tried out that old line about work-life balance, but it's true. I wanted to be able to get myself in a situation where if I did a good job for someone, they would tell someone else.
Okay.
And if I did a good job for someone, they'd ask me back.
Yep.
So, and I'll explain it this way. You get lots of people in my industry who want to get lots of work and do lots of jobs, but go in and go out, go in, go out. A bit of care, not much responsibility, in and out. I decided through repeat referral that I wanted to work with my clients long term. It was never about going in and leaving quickly. It was about going in and becoming part of the furniture.
Okay.
So I focus on a small group of clients, but I'm with them year after year after year after year. And I get to know them intimately. I become part of them. And that's where I drive my greatest result. When I get phone calls from people who say, can you come in and do something for me for a day and never again, I balk at that completely. Okay. A, I don't believe it drives an outcome or result. And two, I don't think it's meaningful. To me, it's all about that repeat referral drives long-term loyalty.
Yes.
Between me and the customers that I have. So I'm working with customers now that I've been working with now for 9-10 years and continue to do so to this day.
Yep.
And for me, that's off the back of doing a really good job for them, wanting to help them, desirous of helping them, producing an outcome, and I guess hoping then that the way the universe works is what I call the law of reciprocity. I talked about 3 laws of persuasion. I talked about the law of scarcity with you. There's a wonderful law that I practice, and this is really my marketing approach, which drives digital marketers absolutely insane. And that is this. If I do a good job for someone and they see value in it, it is suggested that they will return it in kind in some way, whether you know it or you don't.
Yep.
If that pool installer does a great job for me and I see value in it, it is highly likely I will tell someone else without him even knowing, go and get that guy to install that pool for you. Don't go anywhere else. That doesn't require advertising and marketing. However, I accept the fact that there's a lot of great stuff about websites and advertising and marketing. I've just never gone down that path and have chosen not to. Doesn't mean to say that I might not move into that space.
Yep.
It's held me in good stead, however, just to be a bit old-fashioned around if I work hard for you and you see a result, you'll bring me back.
Because you've been pretty diligent in the way that you've actually set your work-life balance, as you said.
Yeah, sure.
And you only work part-time.
Yeah.
So is it 2 days a week? Is it 3 days a week? Can you vary that? Because I think a lot of people see this as a major goal of going into business initially, right? Get a bit of control over your life and maybe the ability to come in and out as you please. Quite often it goes the complete opposite than that, doesn't it? And we lose all control.
Absolutely.
So
agreed.
You've done very well at taking control. So can you just give us a little bit on maybe how much you do work and then how you've thought about setting that up?
Yeah, I probably work on average about 3 days a week on average. Some weeks. Yeah. Next week I work 5 days. Okay. I'm interstate. I'm not home for the 5 days.
Okay.
And there'll be other weeks where I might be working a day a week or 2 days a week or 3 days a week or 4 days a week.
Yep.
So it does vary considerably. Over the course of a year, however, I think consistently I'm probably at about 3 days. The nature of my work too, Matt, is such that it's exhausting. So I need time to reset and plan and prepare. I could not possibly... So if you take my role as a presenter or as a coach or trainer, it would be impossible to do that 5 days a week.
Yes.
You would never survive. You actually need time to reset. It's actually interesting. I've got a colleague of mine who does a similar role to me.
Okay.
He's a trainer. He's also a runner. He's a very good runner. So he runs long distances.
Yep.
And he has one of these watches.
Oh, yes.
And he measures the number of calories he burns.
Yep.
And let's say, for example, he'll go on a 10-kilometre run and let's say he burns 10,000. He says that he wears that in a day's training and he's burnt the same number of calories. He's exhausted by the process.
Yeah, I've heard this a few times, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm in the business that I'm in, I need to actually spend time to reset. I'm an introvert by nature, so to be an extrovert means I exhaust myself.
Yes, yep.
And by the time it's ended and I drive home or fly home, I can barely string 2 words together.
Leave it all on the floor, as they say.
Yeah, so it's critical for someone like me to maintain a work-life balance. If I tried to do it 5 days a week, this would have ended years ago.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you look at people who are very accomplished in this space, yeah, they can't do that. If you don't give it your all, you probably could.
True. There's a balance in there. I mean,
Yeah.
sport's similar, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If you play AFL, you can't play 2 games a day. Like, it doesn't work. Like,
Well, you play
need
2 hours a week.
That's what I mean. That's
Yeah.
all you can do, right? And even a lot of players can't do that just because of the nature of what they're doing. And there's injury, factors and all that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
I mean, the burnout in sport is a big factor.
Yeah, and I think in business you see burnout.
Oh,
And
I couldn't agree more.
You would see it all the time.
I do, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I have business owners talk to me about that. And this is where it comes back to it's this laser beam focus. What do I do well? And let's thrash the hell out of it.
Yes.
Rather than try to do 100 things and maybe 95 of them are not done so well. And that we hear that all the time, but it's probably true. I've got a whiteboard at the end of my bed on leaning up against the wall. So when I wake up every morning, the first thing I see is that whiteboard. And that whiteboard's got some interesting things on it. And that sets me up for the day, but it actually gives me the laser beam focus that I need.
Ideas you're talking about, or thoughts?
Clients, the money they're giving me, the days I'm working, thoughts about what I can do for them, what I can deliver, some proposals I need to put out there. I have that mapped out on a whiteboard. I did it on a whiteboard, and I actually said to my wife a few weeks ago, it was at the beginning of the year when I decided, what's my year going to look like? How am I going to set myself up for success? And I said to my wife, I've mapped it out on the whiteboard. And she said, where are you going to put the whiteboard? And I said, I don't know. Now, normally it leans against the wall in the study, and I invariably don't look at it because it's out of sight, out of mind. When I came home one day, it was leaning up against the wall of the bedroom at where I wake up. It's the first thing I see. And I thought, well, that's interesting. You put it in that posy, but that's been really good for me.
So just to clarify, your wife put it in that position for you. So
yeah, real team-based approach.
Yeah, I was going to say that's
I thought that was really cool.
Awesome.
And that really has helped me this year achieve and work towards the goals that I've set myself for the year. Something that's I haven't talked about today. As part of that perception, action, result, laser beam focus, law of scarcity. A lot of it comes to the real power of being goal-driven. And the very best business people that I work with, they have got that by the bucket load, and they do that incredibly well. They're very much goal-set minded.
Work backwards. We've heard it a number of times, work backwards from what they're trying to do. And
yes, in my world, for salespeople, we call it backward planning, sales engineering and backward planning. I need to make $10, but the $10 is largely irrelevant. It's just a lag indicator. What they're really interested in is the lead indicators, what happens prior to that to get to that point.
Yeah.
Very successful business owners, very successful people in business are not overly concerned about the lag. They're very interested in the lead. And to do those lead indicators well, to get to that point, they're building in lots of targets and goal setting and objectives along the way to achieve what it is they want to achieve. The result invariably takes care of itself.
So they take a goal and then they work it all the way back to a habit that's going to result in that goal, right?
You're absolutely right. But there's a lot of psychology in play with that. I call it the 4 Ds of goal setting. I practice this a lot, and I talk to business owners about this. The first D is decision.
Yep.
I set myself a goal. I've actually got to decide on that goal and believe in it.
Yes.
If you set yourself a goal you don't believe in, you're just about dead. Your subconscious will get you, will sabotage you, by the way. The next one is, so you've got decision and then you've got divulge. You need to write that goal down and to share it with someone. Accountability is critical.
Yep.
Decision, divulge. Very best salespeople, very best business leaders I meet do this and do it well.
So they make their goals known.
Okay. So that they can build in accountability. When you don't make a goal known, you're not accountable to anyone.
Yep.
It is highly likely you'll self-rationalise yourself out of the goal and its achievement. The next one is direction. So decision, divulge and direction, and I work with people around this, is what exactly are you going to do to achieve that goal, which is your backward planning.
Yep.
It's that strategic intent. Those steps you need to take to get to that point. Yep. And the last one, you'll find this a bit weird, it's delight. I find that lots of business owners achieve goals and never reward themselves for achieving them. That's a big, big problem out there in business land.
That's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yep. I know I hear lots of business owners say to me, I achieved that goal and I moved on to the next thing. Just hold on for a moment. When you achieved that goal, what did you do? What do you mean? Did you celebrate that in some way? No. I just moved on to the next one. Whoa. Hold on a second. Your subconscious has worked incredibly hard for you to achieve. By the way, subconscious and goal setting is inextricably linked. Yep. Your subconscious worked very hard for you, and yet when you achieve it, you don't reward your subconscious. Look out. Your subconscious is going to get you back for that in some way, shape or form. You better make sure you incentivise and reward yourself for the great work that you've done. Lots of people in business actually forget that. They just move on from job to job to job.
Yeah, and I guess it doesn't have to be something out of this world, does it? But it has to be something. I'm talking in terms of what you reward yourself with.
Doesn't matter what it is.
Just something.
It's about you affirming what you've done, and it's about you letting your subconscious know that you've done it, it's been achieved, and you thank your subconscious for it.
Yeah, telling yourself that it's actually okay that you've done these things, and that if you run these patterns again, you should invariably achieve things in the future.
Which means it then reinforces that wonderful self-perception,
yes,
which then furthers the action and attitude and behaviour to get greater results.
Yep.
And then that goes back to reconfirming that perception. And it goes around and around and around. Doesn't mean there won't be issues along the way, but if you're prepared for those in advance, you can deal with them really well.
Just a few more questions, Sean, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure.
If you could click your fingers and have it all achieved in the next 10 years, where do you see yourself sitting? Are you still working in organisations? Are you still training people?
10 years from now?
Yeah.
Well, that means I'll be nearly 63. It's a really great question,
Do you think,
Matt.
well, maybe I'll ask this question. Do you think that far in advance? How do you set your goals? You mentioned your 1 year goals.
Yeah.
So the 10-year time frame, is that something that you do or don't look at?
No, I don't. For myself, and I appreciate that other business owners might look that far in advance.
Yes.
The nature of my industry is that I work to about 12 months ahead.
Okay.
I work in a very volatile industry.
Yep.
And one of the issues I face is there are a lot of business people out there who struggle to understand learning and development and training and coaching. There's lots of resistance to what I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would have thought that you're called in by businesses who are trying to achieve something. So I would have thought that they'd like the help. But you're saying...
Yeah, you're right, but there are people within those businesses who find it very hard to wrap their head around training, learning, development, coaching. When was the last time they got it? When they were at school.
Yeah.
How do they make sense of that? So I tend to live in a world that can be quite resistant at times to developing people within their company. You'll be amazed. There are many salespeople out there, for example, who'll never get any training for their entire career.
Yeah, I could actually see how that would happen.
Yeah. So because of that resistance and that volatility, I often think about a year out.
Okay.
Because I need to, for my goal-setting purposes, I need to work that year very, very hard.
Yep.
Even though it's repeat referral, it doesn't mean I don't meet resistance along the way. And sometimes, by the way, I'll get companies that will call me in and then we'll talk and then they'll realise that, oh, this is too hard. And then they don't want to do it. So it's not always a perfect model.
Yep.
And that's why I tend to be more short-term in my goal setting as opposed to other business owners who have an ability by virtue of their industry and the job they do to look more long-term.
Yeah.
But if I had my way in my 60s, I'd like to be playing more golf.
I was going to say maybe get that handicap down to which is
a big one. If I have an ability to be more on the golf course, be more with my children and grandchildren, and I think that'd be pretty nice. I think that's where I'd like it to be. Pretty simple stuff.
A question I ask everybody, Sean, if you could have one law changed or implemented, what would that be?
One law?
Yeah.
An actual law?
Yeah.
Law changed or implement a newly created law, for example?
You can take it any way you want. You can apply it to the world that we live in, or to your particular industry?
I'd like a law of well-being to be institutionalised.
Okay.
And what I talk about in terms of well-being is I think we should be forced to make life a little bit easier for everyone. I think we've got to a stage where we've built in so much complexity in our world. I think sometimes we forget about the well-being of individuals and people as in the pursuit of whatever it is we're pursuing. I'd like to see the law of well-being.
Okay.
Because I think when people are happier and more content in what they do, and if we forced that situation by law, we'd learn a lot more. And if we learnt a lot more, we'd get greater results. This weekend, I spent a couple of days with a mate of mine, and over a couple of beers, he told me about a quote, and the quote was, "Well-being is the oil of learning." And I thought,
Because you're in a place where you can learn the best, yeah, okay.
and the very best business people are always learning, never believe they've got it. They're always looking and learning and trying different things and wanting to be really very powerful in their own knowledge.
Yep.
They want to learn and they want to keep learning. That's why they get people like me to come in, I suppose, and talk things through. But you've got to start from a pretty good place, and that well-being place is critical. That's the oil of all that learning which leads to future success. I'd like to see a law of well-being. I think we've earned the right now in this world to actually say, you know what, there's a lot of madness that goes on. We've got to institutionalise things to such an extent that we're increasing people's happiness, feeling good about themselves, which fundamentally means raising emotional intelligence. It's almost the law of EI, the law of emotional intelligence. We need to institutionalise that. We need people to have their awareness of themselves raised more, help them with their own self-motivation and self-management, help them to be more empathic, because that leads to greater relationships. And if we institutionalise that, we're just about home.
Do you have any, it's a nice follow-on question actually, do you have any books or documentaries that you recommend in your field, in your space, as valuable reads or watches?
There's millions of them. Mm-hmm. I've been doing a lot of work at the moment in talking to people and showing videos around Simon Sinek.
Oh, yeah.
And his whole notion of why.
Why, yeah.
And that's one that I've been using quite a bit of late. There are many more and too long to discuss, but what I love about his modelling of the moment at the moment is he's very much about emotional intelligence, by the way. Very big on that in all sorts of ways. But I love the way he's captured this whole notion of why we do what we do.
Yep.
You know, the why of things, why we're in business. You know, and if we really thought that through, and I think that's very powerful in assisting us understand the why, which means that we understand ourselves, our perception of things, and where we're at. And I think that leads to greater well-being. I think the why is a bit lost for many people in business, and we've got to be a bit careful about that at the moment. I think it's a bit lost.
I remember when I first watched that talk that he did about the, you know, sort of when all that started, his theory on why. I'm not sure whether he suggested it in the talk or not, but I remember after that, I started asking myself that question of everything that I was doing. You know, why am I eating this? Why am I doing this particular workout? Why am I dealing with these clients? Why am I in this business? You know, why am I thinking about this person or that person, or why?
Yeah.
And it does bring up some interesting thoughts when you start to really try and try to identify your intention behind your actions, because I'm just like everybody, a lot of other people, I guess, that you just default sometimes into a bit of autopilot, and you need that question to really have a bit more understanding, maybe a bit of wake-up call on why you're actually doing things. So
you're absolutely right, Matt. I'll often ask business owners, why are you doing it? And many business owners will look at me blankly and they'll say to me, what? Where did that question come from? I'll say, no, seriously, why are you doing what you're doing? And they will find it very difficult to actually express that. And I'll have business owners who say to me, I've never thought about that.
Is there any correlation between the people that have a good answer and the state of their business and those that, and what's that correlation?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People who truly know why they're doing what they're doing, they tend to drive greater results.
Okay, so they grow quicker. And
they do, as opposed to people who not so much why. They can tell me what they do. Yep. That's only part of it.
Yep.
That what's cool, and we get that, but what really sits behind that, your true purpose through that why, is really critical. And Cynic talks about it with, I think
of course,
he talks
he
about
does, yeah.
various companies that have discovered that why,
Yep.
and that has led to them being the biggest companies in the world. Apple, by the way, is his classic example.
Yes.
They went to why.
Yep.
Not how or what, but why. And he believes that many businesses, if they actually approach it from that angle, would be more successful. Without doubt, people who can express that to me well are the ones that make more money than anyone else and seem to be happier.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to add? Any parting words for anyone who comes across this recording and they're...
You know what? Before the recording, we talked about something, and I think this is important, and I called it stuff and because. I meet too many people in business, and I'll say to them, what do you sell, for example?
Yes.
And most people sell something. Stuff. Why do you sell it? Because. And that's about as far as the conversation goes. I love working with business owners who don't talk like that. It is stuff and because, but they can take it further than that. It's more than stuff. It's more than because. And they can truly articulate why they're doing what they're doing. And I say to people out there, less about stuff and because, and more about why am I doing what I'm doing? What are the results I want to achieve? And how do I get to that point? And really sit down and strategically plan that and prepare for that, but equally come back to the psychology of it. The perception, action, result will fundamentally determine whether they achieve it or not. And they'll remove themselves out of that stuff because mentality, and they'll become quite successful. And I see that a lot. And I put it out there to anyone who, when if they're watching this or listening to this, when they switch it off and go and sit down, just spend a few minutes and say to yourself, even write it down, PAR, and draw the connecting arrows. Where am I at with my perception, action, result as it currently stands? That will be a really powerful moment for them, for the listeners, in terms of understanding what then drives them from there and being highly effective.
And if someone does want to track you down because you don't have anything available.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you do have a LinkedIn account. So
I am on LinkedIn.
You can find me
on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, lots of people make connection through LinkedIn to me. They'll send me, what do they ever call it, an in-message, whatever it might be these days.
Yes.
So Sean Stryker on LinkedIn, absolutely. Also, a lot of people send me emails, so it's sean@realitysales.com.au.
Okay.
So sean@realitysales.com.au.
Put that in the notes.
Yeah, a lot of people actually send me emails as well, but generally people will at least find me on LinkedIn, and then they will call me on my mobile because it's on LinkedIn, send me an email. It's generally how it works. In the absence of no website, no social media presence. Some people, by the way, make connection with me on Facebook.
Oh, there you go.
Facebook.
I didn't know you had.
do that.
That's good. I didn't know you had Facebook.
And they'll find it that way as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cheers. All right, Sean, I'm going to let you get back to your day.
Thank you
I want to thank you for carving out a bit of your day and having a chat. And I hope I've, for the listeners, effectively picked some valuable information out of your
Love
mind.
your questioning, and thank you for your time. I enjoy these times. I've learned as much from you as I hope you've learnt from me, and it was really good, really powerful moment.
Certainly have. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, cheers.
Hey everybody, it's Matt again. Thanks for listening. Just a couple of things before you guys clock off. You can get all Trench Talk episodes at xrm.com.au/podcast. You can also sign up for other goodies at the same site. Just plonk your email in there and you are covered. That's X for X-ray, R for Romeo, M for Mike.com.au/podcast. If you really like what I'm bringing you, please head to iTunes, subscribe to this show and leave a review right there. And lastly, if you want to contact me directly, type the @ followed by Mr. Matt Reynolds into your search bar and you'll find all the social links. Goodbye.